2nd of April. 2nd of April. The danger is, in a previous video I made down at the shed, I could have said March, I hope not, April anyway. I'm going to put it up anyway. So I've made a video, it'll be coming up after this one, on the heat on my shed, my cattle shed, just as a kind of an example. It's a bit long-winded. Look at it if you like. Look at this. This is more to the point. Solar panels part 2. Now, I got a great response on the video on the solar panels. And I'm trying to deal with a few of them. One of them is by Harold Moon. Funny, Moon came up twice. Harold Moon, and he asks the question about, he says that there's now like zoom in or remote confessions where you can go to confession without actually being in the company of the priest in the confession box. Now, I'm a Roman Catholic of sorts. So this is a development I haven't heard of, and it's interesting, but I will tell you a story here. He said his aunt got a call, was doing the confession, and the priest asked her had she any money and could he give her bank account. I don't want to be unpolitically correct. I bet you he was from somewhere in Africa or Pakistan. They're constantly ringing me looking for me details of my bank. And the guards refused to investigate it. It's an absolute disgrace. But anyway, there was a woman I knew, no relation of mine, a very simple-minded woman. Her husband worked very hard, had no family, and he died. And she made a will, and she had land, and she had money, and she had cattle, and she made a will. But he was dead about a month when a car pulled up outside the house and a couple of men dressed in clerical garb arrived. And they were from the Oblate, or the White Fathers, in Cork. Now, this woman was in contact with a local parish priest who's now long gone to a nursing home and dead. And he didn't push her, but he made the point that when she'd made her will, that if she wanted to remember the church, the local church, and himself, the church wouldn't do any harm. He didn't push it too much. It'll be lucky for you and God will bless you and all that. So he was a very straightforward priest. I knew him well. He was a decent man, to tell you the truth. He was from up around Clonmel, Meath or somewhere. I don't know if there are many decent ones up there that vote for Helen McEntee, so I'd be dubious. But this fellow maybe was the exception. And I have a few friends with the Pylon groups and that in Meath, so I have to be very careful. I'll be very, very careful. Oh, very, very careful. Anyway, the thing about it is that when she died, her will was read out, and she left the whole lot, except for, I think, about £500 to the Oblate White Fathers in Cork. And it amounted to something like 50,000, 25 to 30 years ago, euros. Pounds, more than euros. And somebody was talking, I was talking to somebody who was remotely related to her, and they thought they'd get something, and they got nothing. And he said he asked her why she left all to the White Fathers. And she says, they gave me a guarantee. So the local priest could only tell her God would bless her if she left him a little. He wasn't too greedy. And a wee bit to the church. And there's nothing wrong with the priest saying, give a bit to the church. There was a great footballer in Kingscourt, Victor Sherlock, God be good to him, he's now passed away. And he won the lotto. But before he won it, about 2 months before he won it, the priest said of the altar, that same priest, if anyone wins the lotto here, I want a few pounds to tar the driveway outside. They were making parking places for cars. But nothing happened anyway. About 2 months went by and Victor won the lotto. I think it was €250,000. And fair enough, he left enough to tar. He gave them enough. I think it was around maybe 25,000 or something, but he did. He happened to be at Mass and he heard it and he did give them the money there and then out of the lotto. That's just a fact, showing the goodness of people, everything good. And the priest was quite right to ask it, quite fortuitous, and it was the same priest. But anyway, he didn't give this lady the guarantee of heaven. She wanted eternal life. She wanted it, number one, for her, maybe for her husband and a few people she knew, but she didn't care about anyone else. They could go to hell. Anyway, she said the White Fathers gave a guarantee and she left her money to them, whereas the local priest only told her he'd bless her. So that's an example of this phone-in confession, and I'd say, I don't know, is it common, but we'll do another video on it. I think it's very interesting. It'd make a good subject for Val's Pictorial Weekly as well. Now, we'll cover off that. Harold Moon, I've dealt with you, Harold. The next one I want to talk about is PTO generators for tractors. Now, remember, you can buy a power take-off generator. They're as old as Methuselah. The first thing to remember is you're tying up your tractor. So if you have a generator on the tractor, how are you going to use your tractor? If you want to draw a bale or use bales, how are you going to work the cabling? Is somebody going to drive off and it plugged in? The other way, what about an old tractor? Well, you could sell the old tractor, I presume. Now, remember that you can buy a diesel generator with the diesel generator attached. And the phase of the engine and the speed of the engine is designed so that it keeps the 50 hertz fairly good. So, for lighting and all of that sort of stuff. Now, you know what a grandfather clock is. If a grandfather clock has a spring or weights up in a big wheel going round like this, and there's a whole heap of smaller wheels, and the big wheel drives the smaller wheel, and using leverage, it's actually leverage, the wheels go faster down the way till you come to an escapement which goes this way, click, clock, click, clock, click on the wheel, you know, like, or this way, click, clock, click, clock. Now, if you take away that escapement mechanism that interacts with the wheel, with the wheel, you will have nothing to retard it. But if you let it go, the spring, the weight won't just fall. It won't just do this. If you have only the wheel that the weights are on, or the spring, it'll unwind that way. Real quick. Very fast. It'll go through the bottom of the clock. But if you have any gears between it and the escapement, that's the last wheel, when it's going with the escapement, it only goes round about twice a day. The big wheel, the wee one goes round 3 times a minute or 4 times. If you take away the escapement control, the clock will speed up a little, but not much. It could still take it a half a day to unwind and let the chain go down the whole way. So the chain will go down very slow. The more cogs you take off the bottom of it, the quicker it'll go. The point is, gears use energy. Gears themselves require energy. Because if you have a gear wheel driving this, the same pressure goes into the bearing, like this, as goes in here. Do you see what I mean? So there's pressure here on the casing of the gearbox. So they're inefficient. Now, with a tractor, with my Ford tractor, the power take-off goes at the normal speed at the particular engine rate. I think, don't quote me, I think it's 750 revs per minute at 220 revs of the engine. But in some of them, they have a kind of a flat flange with 3 bolts, and the Fiat has it. And if you take out that, there's a little 1/4 inch, 3/4 inch by 1/2 inch little steel plug in there, and if you take out that and put it away carefully and bolt it back, the PTO, the power take-off, will go at 1,000 instead of 750. Please don't quote me on the exact numbers, like it doesn't matter. It's on the clock. It'll show you on the dash. Okay, so you can get up to 1,000. Now, some tractors may have an internal lever to do that, but most of the older Masseys and that just went at the 750 at that given rate, and that's the way they were designed. It's good enough for most things, and most farm implements are designed to work on that. So the point about that is, no matter whether it's 1,000 or 750 or whatever, you have a step-down gearbox. The engine is running 2,500 revs per minute, and the PTO is only going at 750 revs a minute. So that's a step-down gearbox. Now, because it's a step-down, you have more power on the output, but you still have a waste on the gearbox. Now, your power take-off comes off, and you plug it into the generator, and the generator has a rotor about this size and an outside about this size, and it has to run at least 1,700 revs per minute. And indeed, as I see some of them here, they have to run at 3,300 revs per minute. They have to run at an exact phase. Now, sorry about taking that call. I had to take that call. Now, so you have an inefficiency in stepping it down, and then you go into the generator itself with the PTO, and you have to speed it up. I think around, people will comment here, it doesn't matter. You have to speed it up. A step-up gearbox is very inefficient, as the grandfather clock method or example shows. Even if you take away the escapement, the whole weight will only fall slow. So a step-up gearbox uses energy, and it transmits a lot of the energy into the casing of the gearbox, and then it gets down to the rotor, and then it works all right. Now, it should be equal to a diesel generator in the phase and all that, but remember that a tractor is an immensely powerful machine, extremely powerful and extremely useful machine, and it can generate electricity from the PTO, certainly. And the old steam engines were used by the travelling shows and circuses long ago with a dynamo from the belt, and they could power the whole place with electricity. So there's nothing new about a tractor generating electricity, but you're putting it through two sets of gearboxes, and that reduces the inefficiency. Out of that, you have to take then the fact that the tractor's tied up. Now, if you had an old tractor with the back end gone in it, you might run it in that way. We have a lot of space taken up, whereas with the standard generator, I'd say it's only about that size for a single phase. And you could build a wee hut away from the house a bit and have it away over there, and you could put a self-starter on it, and you wouldn't hear it much. In a lot of big public buildings, I've often heard that the generators clicking in. They do make a bit of noise. Yes, noise is the whole problem with everything, including the windmills and everything else. So I've dealt with that. Why they do use them. A lot of people buy them thinking they're the same as a direct drive generator, but they're not. Now, the other thing about the direct drive generator is that you have the momentum of the central rotor of the generator. The alternator is the right name. You have the flywheel of the engine and the crankshaft of the engine. So you have the weight of the engine crankshaft, the flywheel, and the rotor of the generator. So you have a great extra momentum. You don't have that with the geared version, because the gears cancel out it all. All right, enough said. Now, another man there says the tidal energy is from the moon. That's true, actually. Yeah, there's nearly no examples. They say Strangford Lough in County Down is an example of where it could be done. It possibly could. Any inland sea will work. Very rare, very unusual, and very feeble. Not a lot in it, people will say there is. Now, another point is made there about a 12-volt battery. Now, yes, I saw them in the farm centre, a 12-volt inverter, where you can take a battery power and put it into mains and do a lot of work around the house with it. Now, it'll only do lights and small stuff. If you're going to power the whole house, you need a big set of batteries. But there is an inverter. And then they make the point, why not use the solar panels to charge up your battery pack and have maybe, if there were lead acid batteries, well, you need 220 divided by 12. You need 20 of them by my calculations, 12 lead acid batteries on a rack, which about a farm or even a dwelling house is not that big, but you'd want to square it with your insurance company. Now, of course, there are lithium-ion batteries and all of that. Now, you've got to take in, if you're talking about the environmental cost of making all this in terms of CO2. I mean, electricity made in England from coal is counted in Ireland as zero carbon. So that'll tell you the fraud that's going on. So yeah, this thing about inverters may work, but I can tell you that with the mains grid, you cannot use any inverter to bring this frequency exact. The frequency is brought exactly by huge rotors, some of them 12 feet across. There's a very good example of one there in Switzerland, a very old one. An antique generator show you a lot better. And big rotor going round, okay? And so it keeps it stable. The weight of all of those keep the grid at the proper hertz. If you have an inverter, it can't do that so well. And my interpretation of the inverter is it needs the power from the grid to keep it in line. So I just wonder, there's no test being done because nobody will do tests because they're afraid of the result. So that's that out of the way. Now, so then Donovan, I think it is, 861, he says when you measure the whole thing over a year, well, really the only way to measure electricity devices generating or use is over a year. This thing that the wind blew hard on the 15th of March and you had you had 90% of the power, well, you can only have 67 for the grid was powered by wind. That's not the point. That's not the point. That's like saying a person who's 72, his heart beat 70 times a minute all his life, and tomorrow it's not going to beat at all, but it'll beat for the rest of his life. Well, obviously, if you don't keep beating, you're gone. People don't understand that the electricity grid must be 24/7 in a modern economy. And Dave McKenna makes the point that he installed solar panels and an inverter, 5.3 kilowatt battery, and that he's getting 20 kilowatt hours. We see, just to explain to non-experts on that, the way you measure any power is going back to James Watt. I always think it's amazing like how people have their name applied to a thing. Like Diesel is that Diesel fella, Rudolf, isn't it? Rudolf Diesel. I mean, he invented the diesel engine and he died, but diesel's everywhere. His name is the most reproduced everywhere just because he happened to invent it, diesel. And the name sounds so useful for a fuel, like diesel. You get this impression, oh, now you're sucking diesel. Like it just suits it so much. And Watt was an Englishman and he invented this way of counting energy and work done. And he was James Watt, and he another man of his time. I admire these people so much. I mean, Isaac Newton, he invented this the test of strengths and to still measure concrete in newtons. It's unbelievable. Fair play. I think it's a good thing in our society that we do honour those people who do this. So he says that he had 20 kilowatt hours. Now remember, the first thing about electricity, it's measured in watts. And so is most things, watts. W-A-T-T-S. I think it's justifiable to use a small w because it's so common usage. Anyway, watts. Now, a watt is tiny. There's about 730 watts in a horsepower. A watt would really be a candle. It's minimal. But why is that? Because he has to avoid divide that by 2, keep it low. So then a kilowatt is a k-watt, and it's certainly, I think it's a small k. I just get confused whether it's k or w, doesn't matter. So kilowatts 1,000 watts, and that's a unit of electricity in the house, and a megawatt then is 1,000. So that's all a great way of counting it, no problem there at all. So Davis, just to explain, the kilowatt is the instant power. So if you had a meter on a wire that was running with, let's say, a ring of electric cooker, it might show 1 kilowatt, 1,000 watts. You understand? But it's no measure of work done. The work done then is when you say for an hour. So you say kilowatt, ran 1 kilowatt for an hour. So if that ring of the cooker runs for 1 hour at 1 kilowatt, that's 1 kilowatt hour, or as we call it, 1 unit. It's become known as the unit, and it's a standard all over the world. Great job, very, very well done. Great way, simple for students and everything. No complaint about that. Now, so there's the thing. So I explained that. Now Dave McKenna says he's getting 20 kilowatt hours. I don't know how long he gets that over or whatever. I'll not dwell on it because there is a wee area here that I'm not too well read on. Is it fed back into the grid? Now, there was another comment there, and I didn't make a note of it here on the paper because what happens with my smartphone until I get my computer, it doesn't show all the comments. But I'll be reading them as soon as I get it. But the thing about it is that if you have it connected to the grid and it's producing electricity in and the power goes off, if the ESB wanted to do work on the line, they can't cut off the line. They'd have to go round to your house or they'd have to some way and jam it. So that's something I don't know. My own opinion is that the Electricity Supply Board will not tolerate solar panels fed into the grid in any numbers. I just don't see that happening. that would play havoc with their generation, because you'd have the windmills looking to get in with non-synchronized direct current power, more or less, and you'd have these doing it, and you have the commercial solar farms, and all of these can only work at certain times in limited capacity, and can only and go off at night for solar, go off at wind and calm conditions, and you still have to keep at least 37% of the grid running in fossil fuel type or nuclear generation. And if there's neither wind nor sunshine, you have to full whack. So if your system is drawing 5,000 megawatts, you have to be careful of generating that. And you have to switch it on and switch it off. And that's playing puck with your boilers. And the result is they get fed up with the whole thing and they buy diesel generators. And my point, and that's why we're burning 56 lorry loads of diesel every day to make up for efficient plant that was turned off. And if the government's going to be burning diesel and Intel is going to be burning diesel, why shouldn't the farmer be burning diesel? Now, this brings me to another interesting point. And I have generators here, and they do work. They're noisy. That's the problem. But I have generators here, and the thing about it is, why would I not install batteries and charge the batteries and disconnect the mains altogether? In fact, with my internet on the farm here, I'm getting such good reception out of the sky that I may well dump paying, I think it's 80 a month for my internet for the lines. So could you get to a situation where mains power would be redundant, where you'd be able to run your generators in the morning, run your generations in the evening, charge up your batteries for light load when there's people doing work, or you're working the lathe or the milling machine or the hoover, or you're washing dishes? Use the batteries, use the generator, and it'll be synchronized 50 hertz power. You can certainly use batteries for lighting. Can you use fridges and that with inverted power? Well, they say you can, that it doesn't matter with small equipment. I just wonder. When I was getting my shed wired, the electrician warned me about using generators. He says it'll work for lighting, all right, but don't try it with lots of other things. I just wonder how well domestic appliances will run on that. So there's more work to be done, more knowledge to be garnered there. But the thing about it is, folks, before I sign off, we are being lied to. The first rule of thumb dealing with anyone offering you solar panels or anything else is that you're likely to be lied. You're going to get happy talk. You're not getting the reality. If you're going to splash out 10,000, how long will you be getting that back? How long do they degrade? There's different types of solar panels. Some of them degrade a lot quicker than others, but they will produce less. What about the effect of sunlight on them? What about the effect on the roof? How do you fix a leak on the roof? And all of that. So effectively, whoever put on the roof on your house was actually, what didn't know it, was building a roof for solar panels as well. And is there enough power there? Is there enough reinforcement in your roof? And what about slates? What about solar tiles? Slates do come loose. What about tiles, roof tiles and all of that? So these are the matters to be considered, and we'll come back to it again. I hope I've dealt with some of that stuff all right. But just here in my own place, during the aftermath of the storm, I have a 4 kilowatt diesel generator, and I had it out just there, and I had to put it close to the door because to get the wiring in. I had everything, electric blankets, cooking, no problem. Cooked several lovely dinners in my electric cooker. Ran my vacuum cleaner, ran my angle grinders, my welders, pumped the water for the cattle, because I used a long extension I had and I thought somebody stole it. It turned out that I had it down between the generator and the pump connection. Pumped away, no problem. So a generator will do it. It's noisy. But as the price of electricity gets dearer, you see, you could use it. It needs to have the maximum power that you need, and you need single phase for nearly everything. If you need 3 phase, that's for self-starting motors. If anyone wants me to do a video on motors, I'll do that. And I have 3 videos, one A and one B, made 10 years ago, or 12 years ago, and they're the best videos I ever made and will always be there. They're absolutely marvellous. I'll try and post them again when I get my computer. So there's the situation. Have I answered all your questions? Well, at least I've made you wary. I wouldn't believe the Lord's Prayer from Eamon Ryan, the Irish government, Roderick O'Gorman, or any of these idiots that take on to run your life. There's still people. I was a month after the storm, I had no internet wire. And according to the news, there's still people with no internet or telecommunications or telephone wire. Now, if a country can't fix a telephone wire by April for a storm that happened, I think it's the 24th of January, how is it going to do all these wonderful things? It's happy talk. Happy talk. Happy talk. Folks, comment underneath. I'd tread very carefully. Make sure there's no leaks in your electricity that has not escaping away. I've dealt with that in the video. The other thing I do strongly approve of is insulating homes. And this new thing of a lot of Irish homes have a long eave. The eave is out that far, and you can fit insulation, and you can put a fancy brickwork effect and things like that. Do you know? I have to say, I think that's a good idea. This place here freezes in the winter, but it's healthy. It's healthy. You'll get a bit of heat up, and it's not that efficient. But I'll tell you, I'm still here. Maybe if you had too warm a house, it mightn't be good either. I can't tell you about that because I'm not going into the area of medicine. The only thing I can tell you in relation to the biology or the physiology or the chemical thing about medicine and all that is that whiskey makes you drunk if you drink too much of it. That's all I know. I don't know any more than that, but I don't drink too much. That's all I know about human health and consumption. Don't drink too much of that. Good luck, folks. I hope you enjoyed that video. We'll see you back. Thank you.